Today's episode is with a venture capitalist, regenerative farm owner, firefighter, author. It's actually a follow-up to our episode with Martin Crompton. Today, we're speaking with the owner of Union Grove Farm about his experience being a venture capitalist, becoming one of the top VCs in the United States, recognized for 2 years running by the Wall Street Journal, and how that journey led him to find regenerative farming and start creating what will eventually be the largest vineyard in North Carolina. Today's episode is with Greg Bohlen. That's awesome. What was the inspiration for doing this?
I thought we needed it
Yeah.
as a society. It's a great story about a town that banded together to build a high school or to build a school
Okay.
and do it all volunteer.
No way.
Yeah,
How did you become aware of this story?
because my dad was on the board.
No way.
Yeah,
And where was this based?
it's in Moweaqua, Illinois.
Moweaqua, Illinois. Common Men, Lessons from the 1950s. Well, talk to us a little bit about what you wanted people to get out of the book. Let's start
Okay.
there. That's cool.
All
Yeah.
right.
What was run us through kind of the initial inspiration, what you saw that you thought people were missing and why you wrote the book.
So, Common Men is a story about a community that had just undergone a big disaster.
Yeah.
So a mine collapsed and killed, I think, 57 people in the community.
Okay.
And the community had come together to buy the mine.
Oh.
And it didn't work out really well for the community. And so a few years later, in 1949, the primary school building was in effect condemned by the fire marshal because there was a fire in Chicago that was a similar building that had killed a bunch of kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so the community was faced with having to build a new school building.
Mm-hmm.
So they had the lead architect, probably in the state, lived in that town. And he designed a new school building
Okay.
that was so far in the future, it was, I think hard for people to accept. Like the way it was laid out was to catch prevailing winds.
Yeah.
It would go all the way through the building.
Okay.
A flat roof that they could flood for evaporative cooling.
Nice. Yeah.
Lots of glass for solar.
and this is in the 50s.
Yeah, or 1950.
So he's super innovative for the time.
I mean, way ahead.
Yeah.
And a tunnel underneath that would be nuclear fallout proof.
Wow.
So there was just
Took
all
so
of
many
these,
different things into consideration for this new school building.
And so they let it out for bids, and the cheapest bid was like $2 million.
In
And
the 50s too.
they had 500,000.
Oh man. Wow.
So the school board took it upon themselves to see if they could find somebody locally
Okay.
who could manage the project.
Mm-hmm.
They did, and what happened was the community ended up volunteering to build the school.
Wow. Okay.
So the first big hurdle that they came to was that the Moweaqua was very close to Decatur, which is a big union town.
Mm-hmm.
And the union guys wouldn't come down and dig the tunnels. And so they had to hand dig all of the tunnels. So a half mile of tunnel, 10 feet wide, 8 feet deep. They dug by hand.
Sheesh.
And the next problem was that the concrete companies, truck drivers, were all union, and they wouldn't cross a picket line.
Well, why didn't the union want to?
Because
help
it was
them?
all being done volunteer.
Oh, okay. No money in it for them.
No
Yeah,
money,
yeah.
so there was not. They weren't using union labor.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the first concrete truck came down and wouldn't cross the picket line
Wow.
that had been set up.
Yeah.
And so they had to hand mix and hand pour tens of thousands of yards of concrete.
So there were actually people that were like protesting them doing this.
Yeah.
Or very against the idea that people would volunteer to build a school.
Yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of crazy.
Don't build a school to help educate our youth, you know?
Yeah.
Go volunteer. Wow.
So it took them a year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
but they built the school.
Amazing.
And when they got done, they had enough money left over. So they decided to go into the marketplace and pay $5,000 more per teacher than the prevailing wage and find the very best teachers that they could find with the money left over.
Wow.
And they ended up finding great teachers. And that school graduated more college kids per capita than any other school in the state.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, having that strong of a community around you have to think is like such a positive impact on the students.
I think that's what we're missing.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And the stories from that process were what fueled a lot of my passion to build a farm operation.
Okay. Yeah.
And so if you come to the farm, we do everything pretty much ourselves.
Yeah. Keep it in house.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. You know, this, what's coming to mind for me is that book from Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers. I don't know if you've heard this. And he talks about why this one immigrant town was healthier than everyone else. And they're trying to figure out, why are these people living longer than anyone else? And I think they were Italian immigrants in the United States, or they lived in Italy, and their diet was nothing to be, you know, I guess, put on a pedestal. Yeah, it wasn't great. Yeah. But he hit community as being like one of the strongest things, because they lived together, they ate together, they played together, they worked together, and just how positive of an impact that had on lifespan. Yeah. But in your point too, you know, graduating kids to college, all the things, like community is such a powerful thing that, you know, we kind of miss a lot today too, and it's just digital. You don't get that energy, that in-person experience.
Yeah. No, it's really hard. I think in today's society, where we have an electronic society that's based, and if you think about it, everything harkens back to Moore's Law. And I'm not sure if you're aware. Can you
define Moore's Law for us?
Yeah. So Gordon Moore in 1964, on April 9th, not that I know the date that it was published, postulated that computing power would double in every 18 months for the same price. And that was an audacious statement at the time, but it's proven correct.
Okay, yeah.
And so it continues to happen today. And there have been 5 big times when people have said Moore's Law is done. We can't continue Moore's Law.
Yeah.
And technology just keeps finding a way to make it happen. But what's happened is that because computing power has so significantly increased, it's translated through society. And if you think about the pace of change in society today,
oh my gosh, yeah,
we're proceeding roughly on the same path as Moore's Law.
Wow.
So our society is continuing to change and evolve, kind of at a doubling pace every 18 months.
As we get so integrated with technology, we're almost following the pace of technology, right? Like
we are.
Yeah. We're in a way, we're already like, you know, digitally enabled cyborgs with our cell phones attached at the hip, you know?
Yeah. And so the advantage of, I think, the sense of community is that it brings a lot of things back.
Yeah.
To the importance of a true society that are built depending on each other rather than on themselves.
Yeah, I love that. When did that really start coming into your sort of awareness that was missing or something that you wanted to help revive?
Probably about 6 years ago.
Okay.
And that's when I started doing all the research for the book.
Yeah.
And that's roughly the time that I had been a volunteer fireman before, but that's roughly the time that I went back and rejoined the volunteer fire
And just
service.
A few years after you had gotten back to Union Grove, no? Was that 2015 or?
20, well, that would have, I started the book probably about 2015, 2016, and then joined the fire service about 2020, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Man, that is such a cool project. When do you think it'll be out to the public?
I don't know that it'll ever be out to the public.
Oh, nice. All right.
Yeah.
Something that you wanted to put together for yourself then.
Yeah, well, what I really would want to do is find somebody who can more effectively tell the story than I did. I've given all the facts. I've given all the information in the book. And I hope there's somebody who can write it really well and translate it into a movie or some other kind of media so that people really get a chance to learn about,
I get that.
what community can do.
How were you researching the book and putting all of it together? Was that a self-endeavor?
Yeah, well, I spent a lot of time back in Weekly interviewing people.
Yeah.
And there were very few people alive who remembered the whole process.
I was going to say, you're getting to the point now where these people are going to be gone. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they gave me pictures, they gave me records, they gave me all kinds of information. And so the book is stuffed with a lot of facts about what they did and how long it took and the people that were involved.
Well, man, we'll have to add author to the list of, I was thinking VC, farmer, fireman, now author is on the list.
Yeah. Well, that's really, if I left to my own devices, I probably would do a lot more writing.
You do a lot more writing.
Yeah.
That's it's a fun exercise. I really respect it. I've been more of a video guy or like talking and creating like this, but I always have respected writers. So hit on a couple of those things you've had going on in your life. Talk to me about getting into, we'll go back now. Talk to me about sort of discovering and getting into the VC world. What was going on in your life when that became sort of the next chapter for you?
Yeah. So I was a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch, and I got picked to really kind of do what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I decided I wanted to pursue venture capital. Mm-hmm. When I was in college, I had worked as a part of a volunteer team on a DARPA contract that was writing the IPTIP.
Okay.
So after doing that, I kind of became fascinated with technology and where things were going.
Now, what is that you just said, the IPTIP?
Yeah, the Information Packaging Transportation Information Protocol.
Oh, okay. So I don't even know what that is.
That's the internet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that became the internet.
Wow.
So what DARPA was looking to do was they would have dumb terminals. They'd had a central computer with dumb terminals around the ring.
Yeah.
And their concern was that the central computer was so dangerously vulnerable to attack that they'd lose all of the ability. And so what they wanted to do was be able to disperse computing to the various other computers so that so they could talk to each other and they wouldn't be dumb terminals. They'd all have independent power.
Did you realize what was going on when you guys were working on that initially?
No, of course I didn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I mean, in venture capital, the highest compliment you can get is somebody says you're seeing around corners.
Yeah.
And I didn't see around that corner.
Wow. Even though you were so just involved in it at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I was a ham radio operator when I was in high school. I got my ham license.
Okay.
And so we had started working with computers then and working in RTTY, radio teletype. And that's where I got a little bit of my primary experience in code writing. When I came to the University of Illinois, they just had a piece of paper up on the wall that said, if you'd like to learn to write code or you're willing to write code on this project, come and see us. And so I did. And I think there were 32 people at the University of Illinois, University of Michigan, and UC Berkeley.
Yeah. Man.
Schools involved.
So you're on that team working with IPTIP. And that progressed into VC in a way.
It did. I came out and I worked. So I took over the family farm for several years.
Okay.
Did that. Worked in a bank. Bought and sold a bank. And then went to Merrill Lynch. And when I got there, really it was kind of the start of the bubbling of the internet, 95, 96.
Yeah. Okay.
And venture capital really wasn't a thing yet.
No, not at all.
But I had known somebody from that project at the University of Illinois who was working in Silicon Valley. And they said, come on out and see what's going on because it's a brave new world out here. And so
Seriously.
I went out to California and
A whole new
hung
culture.
out with him for a weekend
Okay.
and went to several parties. And I just met a lot of people that were really fundamental in building the infrastructure that became Silicon Valley.
Okay.
So that's what I pursued. That's what I decided I wanted to
I would
work
imagine
with
very
venture
helpful to
capital.
know the companies that are being built, what's interesting, what the trends are looking like.
It was helpful to know the VCs.
Yeah.
Because the VCs knew what was happening.
Yeah.
You know, there weren't very many. You know, there were probably 24 firms
Wow.
at the most.
Yeah.
And everybody knew everything. It was a small, big community.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you got plugged in and you knew one person, you kind of knew everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And they, really tell you what companies were
Yeah.
happening, what was going on. And remember, IPOs back then, a 40 million IPO was a big IPO.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So you do a $10 million, you have a company that was doing $10 million in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big company back then.
Oh yeah.
So
And now
companies
it's got
were
to
a
be a
lot smaller.
unicorn.
Yeah, companies were a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And things happened a lot more quickly because scale wasn't
Yeah.
as big an issue as it is today to get into the capital markets.
Mm-hmm. When you were first getting into the VC world, what was sort of your thesis, interest? Were you focused on specific sectors, types of companies? Like, kind of how did you start, I guess, dabbling, taking your first risk? I mean, what was going through your head when you made that first, deal?
I thought I knew a lot more than I did.
Don't we all?
And I realized that there was a lot of luck involved in this business.
Oh, wow.
To get 100 multiple is
Yeah.
that's a big thing, or to get a 200 multiple is a big thing. And
Yeah.
so when I look back at my career, I've just been egregiously lucky. A lot of smart people work in that industry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And it's always good to know smart people. And the more smart people you know, the more that things aggregate around a mean. And so
Okay.
you talk to 20 people about a deal, and they'd all seen the deal. All of them knew what was wrong with the deal, why the company wouldn't succeed. And then you could make an evaluation as to the ability of the company to actually be successful then, to overcome
Yeah.
those things that everybody believed were big hurdles to being successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the probably the biggest key to my being lucky
Mm-hmm.
is the ability to pick up the phone and call a lot of people and find
nice.
out, what's wrong with this idea?
Yeah.
What's wrong with this company?
Multiple perspectives.
And then make a decision as to whether or not you can either help them overcome it or they can overcome it.
Yeah. So based off of that, it sounds like, each one is probably pretty unique in terms of the team and the situation faced by them. But has there been any sort of common denominator for you? Has there been anything where you can kind of draw a line through the different ones you've done?
Skinny, hungry tigers.
Nice.
We like skinny, hungry tigers.
Skinny,
So
hungry tigers.
companies that are being run by people with an axe to grind or a chip on their shoulder or are just really hungry for success
Yeah.
are much more likely to succeed than companies that people are fat, dumb, and happy. And so predominantly we've invested in skinny, hungry tigers.
Nice. Give me an example of one that you felt like fits that description.
Yeah, boy, lots of them.
Yeah. I can
So maybe
imagine.
Iron Planet would be a fun one to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So Iron Planet was a machinery auction service,
Okay.
and they auction what we call yellow iron.
Yeah.
So construction equipment primarily. And my friend at Kleiner Perkins called me and said, you with your farm background, you ought to see this company.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. And then one of my friends at Excel was on the board. And so I called those guys and got their perspective from being on the board. And then I called about 20 other people and found out what wasn't working.
Yeah.
And why it hadn't grown. It had grown to about 40 million in sales and leveled off. And it had been around about a decade. And so I went to see the company, and within a few minutes, I understood what they had. And it was interesting because they didn't see what they had.
Okay.
What they really had was a data company.
Oh. Yeah.
What you had the ability to do was find out who every bidder was who was not successful.
Yeah.
So if you had a cat, 329 XL with a thumb on it,
Yep.
you knew what people were willing to pay for that
Exactly. Yeah.
and who those people were. And so second bidder data was incredibly valuable. So what we did was we ended up crafting a deal with Caterpillar to give them the second bidder data in exchange for their CAT auction services.
Wow.
So they traded us stock for CAT auction services. We traded them the right to second bidder data. And that became a real driver for the company.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, we went from 40 to 65 or 70 million and just like, in the blink of an eye.
Exactly.
And then we realized that the data could go much further,
Okay.
that the actual value of the data could also be used to help companies manage their capital risk. So when is it that a D6 LGP starts to really lose value for every hour that it's run?
Yeah.
So is it
The depreciation of that machine over time.
900 hours? Is it 950 hours? Is it 1,000 hours? And so the value of that is that we had all these rental companies that were feeders to auction companies.
Yep.
And Ritchie Brothers was our primary competitor at that point.
That's right. I feel like I might have seen those along the highway or something.
Yeah, well, Ritchie Brothers used to have a big show floor north of Durham.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
on Interstate 85.
That's right.
Yeah. And so we went to the auction, we went to the leasing companies and said, we can tell you when you need to sell your equipment if you'll sell everything through us.
Yeah.
And so that worked out really, really well because we made a 4X in 2 years.
Whoa.
On that.
All from being able to kind of reassess the value that the data could bring to external parties.
Data is so valuable. And we're just now starting to monetize data in a lot of companies.
Well, to me, it immediately goes towards how when social media came online, we didn't have any idea as users of it that the data was valuable. And now, I guess after that whole thing had become a major thing, we started realizing how valuable our data was to those organizations.
Yeah.
But that applies to people outside of social media as well.
Yeah. And I have another company called Union that builds POSs for restaurants and bars.
Okay.
And data is incredibly valuable because if you're the server, you can, if there's a promotion, for example, with Absolute Vodka, you can buy a vodka. If somebody orders vodka, you can say, have you tried Absolute? No. I'll tell you what, if you want to try an Absolute, I'll buy you a vodka. And then begin to drive that data and find out whether or not that people like the vodka, whether it was successful, what their repeat purchases are of it across the scale. So
all trying to get into the mind of the consumer.
Data is what really is the gold mine of the 2020s.
Is sort of utilizing data or misuse of data, or I guess just not capitalizing on all the advantages of data, a big thing you're seeing in deals that you're interfacing with?
Well, 2 years ago, yes.
Yeah, but now people are
Today,
starting to pick it up.
People are starting to really catch on and understand the value of what the data can tell them.
So you hit on earlier, one of the biggest compliments you can get as a VC is that you can see around the corner. Now, I mean, talk to me about trying to see around the corner. I mean, that seems like an endless, pursuit of.
It's seeing the next big thing sometimes is really challenging. Sometimes it's really obvious. And we invest not for next year, next quarter, or next week. We're investing for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So when we write a check, a lot of times we're in it for a long time. And what we're trying to do are find common themes that run through successful businesses
Yep.
that are solving problems that can generate real revenue at real margins.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in some ways, seeing around corners, I've probably only done it twice in my career.
Mm-hmm.
But
of nailing it and seeing that sort of
well,
trend come to fruition,
which leads to 100x multiple.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you're always trying to hit.
Yeah,
are the big multiple companies, and I've got a lot of. So my lifetime average is an 8.6 MOIC, which is multiple on invested capital, and I've been really lucky. Like I said, I have good friends. I've been really lucky.
Yeah,
and so that multiple is made up of a lot of, 2s, 3s, and 5s.
for sure.
But there's also the outlier,
Oh yeah, that helps pull up the
number, and then I got a lot of donuts too. So
yeah, I get
zeros.
That.
So
yeah.
you put $1 in, you get 0 back. So those things happen in our business. That's why it's called venture and not, a slot machine where you just put in the money and money comes back out.
Yeah. So, I mean, this whole thing about looking into the future, seeing around the corner, I mean, AI is a huge conversation today. I'd be curious on your thoughts, maybe from more of a macro standpoint on how you think it's going to impact, the day-to-day life of the common man. Like, how are you sort of thinking about this trend and what it could materialize into for all of us?
It's a great question. So ML and AI are already pervasive across the economy. And as the models continuously improve, which Moore's law allows them to do because we're able to throw more computing power
exactly
at the models, I think what you're going to see is that repetitive tasks that people do that are creatives or are focused on documentation are going to become much less cumbersome.
Oh, yeah.
So when you go to the bank for a loan, for example, it will take no time for the loan to be printed out and completed, as opposed to 3 or 4 weeks, with an attorney, with your
closing and your
appraisers and all the other
things,
pieces of it. That process is going to become streamlined. Same thing for, anything that requires today a lot of an individual's time in creating.
Yeah.
We use AI for our rentals on the farm. So we have 9 properties that we rent.
Yeah.
And we use AI to describe the rentals.
Nice.
Build
to
the
get the
ads.
description for it. And,
to build the
nice.
ads. And so
my mom did that with their Airbnb.
It's amazing how good it works.
Yeah.
And how much interest we get when we started doing that.
Yeah.
We went from, 2 or 3 people responding to, dozens.
It's wild when it works, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, man.
So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. You're also probably going to see a lot more use of embedded data.
Okay.
And ways to make your life easier.
Oh, okay.
So if I buy a canoe, I need to buy this is an old example, but if I buy a canoe, I'm probably going to buy paddles.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to buy life jackets.
Mm-hmm.
And, I may buy a trailer, I may not buy a trailer, but all of those pieces are highly predictable.
For sure.
And how companies offer services and goods, I think, will radically change as AI becomes more prevalent.
Amazon already gets me with the commonly bought together
Yeah.
box right below.
Yeah. That's a really simple example.
Simple, but yeah.
Of what folks like Home Depot are in the process of doing.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I've got a company called Samba TV,
Okay.
and Samba. So when you click onto your TV, you buy your big screen, your flat screen TV,
Yeah.
and you start clicking through stuff. One of the things you click through is sharing data, and so Samba is a real-time Nielsen.
Wow.
So when you go into Samba's headquarters, you see the screens of the top 100 TV stations in the United States,
Okay.
or TV channels in the United States, and you see below it how many people are watching.
Wow. Oh man.
So
That's got me feeling a little big brothery.
yeah, it is. But it also allows them to help advertisers drive much better decisions.
Oh yeah.
And to help studios produce things that are more
Oh yeah.
acceptable or more easily enjoyed, or are easy to drive people to watch.
You know exactly what people are in tune
Well,
with.
yeah, and if in, I'm trying to think of an example, and I'm gonna go way back to Rockford Files.
Okay.
The father gets shot,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden everybody changes channels.
Oh yeah.
Then that was not a good thing, right?
Yeah, I didn't like that. Yeah.
So it also helps drive creative decisions.
Wild. Yeah.
So
We've implemented AI in a few different creative capacities. So there's a software that will edit a long form conversation like this for you, and it knows who's speaking, it knows who to show on the screen. I mean, it probably took your time from hours to 30 minutes, maybe. I mean, talk about efficiencies. Like, it's a game changer, and that came online in the last, and that was towards the beginning of when all of these sort of public AI platforms came out. So when I look down the future even further, it gets kind of scary and weird to me. I'm like, oh.
well, the concern is that AI would be able to take what we're doing today and radically change my answers, and radically change what was intended to be conveyed.
Exactly. And there's already a lot of videos of influencers and podcasters promoting products they never had before.
Never heard of
before.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about before the podcast, OpenAI's, I think it's Solara. I might have got that wrong, being their new video platform, and not even opening it up to the public just shows that I guess finally they're realizing wow, this is almost like the ring of power here. We've got to be careful.
Yeah, there's a lot of there are a lot of dangers, like any technology. When I invested in a one-to-many communications company, and met Biz Stone and Ev Williams, I had no idea that would become Twitter, and I had no idea that that could be used in so many powerful ways.
Oh yeah,
that were completely unanticipated. In effect, becoming literally a news channel.
Right. Yeah.
And we saw that happen with a couple of revolutions, with a lot of social things that happened. And I wonder, was that good or bad that Twitter made it?
Yeah.
You have to stop and think about unintended consequences.
Oh, for sure.
Of technology and use of technology.
Yeah. The social media conversation is wild because I feel like we've seen it with different platforms. We see it approached in different extremes, whether it's being very conscious of censoring content, kind of understanding what the conversation is on the platform, or also trying to sort of be the open town square and sort of everything's game. And it's I have that constant internal battle of, what do we need to be able to communicate freely as people, but then also where is the line? What does that line look like? Because our world is social media. I mean, specifically with what I do. So we try to understand and see what's going on. Are you in tune with social media on a day-to-day basis? Is it something you follow?
Well, in my job, I think you have to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to understand what's happening, and particularly, I pay attention to a lot of consumer-facing companies because obviously our farm is a consumer-facing company.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the companies that I'm chairman of the board for is called Hero Bread.
Okay.
That has made extensive use of social media for marketing, and it's a great instant feedback tool.
Oh man, yeah, direct to consumer. Yeah.
People tell you this works, that doesn't work really quickly. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your experience with Beyond Meat, because I know that was a company you were involved in. What was, and I'm curious on your sort of your take on the company's success, where the company is today. What was that journey like getting involved with them, and then what do you think that sort of space looks like in today's world?
So I was at a board meeting for a company called Breathe in Kleiner Perkins headquarters.
Okay.
And Amal Despande, who I had known from his time at his former venture firm when I was a banker, he and I met him and knew him, came into the bathroom and we just started talking. He said, man, there's a company you got to see. I think they're going to change the world. It's revolutionary.
Yeah.
I said, what is it? And he said, it's a TVP company. And I said, oh God, Amal, not again. Because I'd banked ADM's foray into textured vegetable proteins.
Okay, that's what TVP stands for.
Yeah.
Textured
and
vegetable
so
protein.
I said, okay, well, I'll go see him. And so I went to see him. And the product was really good. So the key that they had, comparatively really good. We used to call, you walk into the ADM kitchen while they were working on the TVP stuff, and it literally smelled like crap.
Yeah.
And so that was never going to be a big seller.
What are we going to do with this, ladies and gentlemen?
So ADM sold it as filler.
Yeah.
And never as a real product. But the key to success was that when you denature a protein, the protein crumples on itself and you get tofu. So tofu is denatured protein. If you could staple the ends of it together and get textures, strings like you have in a muscle fiber,
Okay. Yeah.
then you can create, meat that's pretty similar to meat.
Yeah.
And that was what Beyond Meat's technology was. They were able to staple the ends of the proteins together and form fibrous structures of protein that were meat-like. And so I saw that, met the management team down in Los Angeles, spent a half a day with them, and then got on a plane and flew to the production facility in Springfield, Missouri, which is where they were doing all the research and their production at the time. And they were making chicken strips. And I thought they were pretty good compared to anything I'd ever seen before or ever had before. You bit them and there was textures. There were strings like you have when you bite
For sure.
when you bite a chicken strip.
Yeah.
And the more I thought about it, it hit on several of our key themes, one of which is transparency. So it was a very clean production. Used water and heat, didn't use a lot of chemicals to bind or build. It was highly efficient. So 93 to 95% of the protein that came in one end of the plant came out as food in the other.
Got it.
And if you looked at the feedlot industry, about between 12 and 14% of the protein you put into the animal came out as muscle mass. So as it turns out, we could feed the entire world based on the proteins that were grown in Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Missouri. That's shocking, right?
Those economics are wild.
Yeah, and so I invested and went on the board.
Yeah.
And Nothing is ever a straight line.
No.
I came back to the partnership twice and told them that I thought we were going to lose every dime we put into it. And but we just kept working, and we had the great Thanksgiving Day massacre where we fired everybody on the company, including the CEO, but gave him a way back, which he took. And I think Ev did an amazing job.
Yeah.
The CEO did an amazing job of really building the company. And that's what actually led me to regenerative farming.
Yeah.
I was asked to speak at a conference in San Francisco about regenerative societies. And I went to the conference, and I was the naysayer. I said there is no such thing as a regenerative society.
Yeah.
So it's impossible. Don't focus on that. Focus on driving efficiency into the systems, and then wringing margins at the edge of the efficiencies. And
now, can you maybe make that? I'm having a hard time understanding what efficiency means, like in the system, in the food system. What would be like your, I guess, original?
There's an incredible amount of waste in the food system.
Okay. Yeah.
There's an incredible amount of overproduction and underproduction across the food system. And that leads to gross inefficiencies. So as a society, we're spending so much time and energy producing stuff that we don't need. And that takes costs. That takes resources to do that, which are costs to the system.
Yep.
And it causes the things that we want to use or want to consume or want more of, and the way we want more of it, to be grossly mispriced.
Got it. Okay.
And so, that was the
across meat, vegetable, fruit, everything. Yeah.
And so that was the start of my journey.
Yeah.
Because I sat down and I had lunch with a few people, and I thought, wow, they're really weird.
Regenerative farming, promoters.
Yeah. I just see you guys are weird. We got, we got chemicals to do things. Why are we trying to do all this? And so,
for sure.
Not too long after that, I met Martin Crompton, who you interviewed.
Yeah, Martin's awesome.
And so all of those pieces began to really kind of circle around. And it was when I realized that organic labels really don't mean all that much.
Yeah, Martin talked about this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
So what the organic label is concerned about is that we don't have chemicals put onto the food. It doesn't tell you anything about the quality of the food. The biggest predictor of the quality of a food and the nutrient density of a food, and nutrient density is important because you don't get satiated until you have enough nutrients.
Yeah.
And so if the food that you're getting has a low nutrient quality, you're going to consume a lot more of it, which leads to obesity, which leads to diabetes, which leads to heart problems, which leads to, go all the way down, up and down through the list. And so the biggest predictor of nutrient density is the biologic activity of the soil where that was grown on.
Yeah. Martin was calling this like the life force of the soil.
Yeah. Well, we believe that I guess it's now becoming commonly known that the more biological activity, the more likely the roots are to give exates that the crops need in order to grow and to continue to pack carbon densely into the soil. So the Rodale Institute says, and I don't know if this is correct or not, that if everybody was farming regeneratively in the United States, we'd have a negative carbon
Wow.
exit
Yeah.
rate.
Now, so organic doesn't necessarily give us any indication in terms of soil health. It's kind of where
They have bare soils.
yeah.
So our thing is you keep soil covered 24/7, 365 in living roots. And that pours more solar energy, more carbohydrates, more carbon into the soil.
So you had this initial perception of like regenerative is not the way. Like we've got these modern technologies.
Bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so funny because that now leads me to believe that products like Beyond Meat are probably not the best long-term thing. Rather, things grown regeneratively are far healthier for people in the long run.
That's definitely been kind of where my eyes have been opened over the past probably year and a half of being able to visit White Oak. Now talking to Martin, learning about what you all have doing. So I want to get into sort of creating the regenerative model at Union Grove. Because when you got back there, it's my understanding that it wasn't really ready at that point. What did that process look like?
So the initial farm was a tired tobacco soil that had been grown up in trees. So we cleaned it up. And the dirt there, and I call it dirt because it wasn't really soil. There was no life in it.
Yeah.
So we take all the leaves from the towns of Chapel Hill and Carborough and the tree remule from Orange County, and we mix that with our compost tea. So we have a vermiculture lab.
Yeah.
Where we have, I tell everybody, we got 100,000 employees. If they had a backbone, they'd organize, but they're worms, so they just show up for work every day.
We don't want the worms unionizing on Union Grove.
No, I do not want to see them carrying signs. Yeah. So that process began to drive life back into the soil. And so that's what we've been focused on. And last year we planted our first small scale planting. We planted 15 acres. This year we're planting 60 acres, which is our plan to continue to plant kind of each year.
Yeah.
Carrying forward.
The vision's big for Union Grove. Like, when did it get that big?
So I'm going to give you a secret.
Okay.
It's never about the money.
Yeah.
Until it's about the money, then it's all about the money. So you think about that in relationships.
Yeah.
You think about it in negotiations.
Yeah.
You think about it in business. It's what I call a universal principle. There are very few universal principles. That's one of the universal principles. And so I decided to try and build a business that could be a first, which is achieving software margins inside an agricultural commodity business.
Okay.
And so everything that we've done, everything that we do is guided by the principle we have to produce at scale at margin. And the only way to achieve scale, or the only way to achieve our full margin, is at scale. So we have to be big enough that we can employ the special types of people that we need to employ to be able to do what we need to do. So, 9 years ago, we started building the grape that we're using today. And we were lucky enough that Jeff Bloodworth crossed our paths and has built what we're not even sure we want to call a grape because it's 3 times as nutrient dense as a blueberry. It is has 3 times the antioxidant properties
Yeah.
of a blueberry that and I'm sorry I didn't bring some. When people taste it, their jaw drops.
Yeah. I can't wait to try it. I mean,
And the freeze-dried grapes, which were that was another innovation that happened this last fall.
okay.
The freeze-dried grapes, when people taste those, they literally can't believe
Wow.
how good they are.
Because it's essentially sort of a hybrid off of the muscadine.
It is.
Yeah.
Seedless, thin-skinned muscadine.
Seedless, thin-skinned muscadine.
Yeah.
Now, is there a reason why you started with, or did you even start with grape in mind? Like,
No.
you were sort of open to the discovery of whatever it could have been?
Well, I knew that, again, if you start a business where you know what your end result is going to be, which is we wanted to build a business at software margins. So 60% gross margin.
Yeah.
To do that, we had to have, and given the cost of the ground, this ground's not cheap in Orange County.
No, not at all.
It's, you're going to spend $15,000 to $20,000 an acre to buy ground. So you have to raise a high value crop. I mean, the highest and best use for ground in Orange County is to grow houses.
Yeah. That seems like everywhere in the greater triangle area.
Yeah, it's a one-time sale, right?
Yeah, or some multi-homes, multi-family, something.
Yeah, it's not an annual income. And so if I was going to get an annual income that would justify the cost of the ground, I had to be very focused on finding high-value crops.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so the high-value crops kind of in order are truffles.
Okay.
And grapes.
No way.
And so that's what led me to the grapes.
Does the value of the grape, I guess the value of grapes on land change whether it's going to be used in wine or as a table grape?
Well, if we could go grow good table grapes in North Carolina, I'd do it all day long.
Yeah.
But we don't grow good wine grapes. I said table grapes. We don't grow good wine grapes.
Mm-hmm.
But what we can do with this variety is grow a really amazing table grape.
Got it.
And so that's what dictates. So, I mean, I'll give you just the gross economics. We grow 10,000 pounds of fruit per acre.
Yeah.
We get $4 a pound for the fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you some idea of the kind of the gross revenue of what we're doing.
As you get your acres, yeah. Talk to me about how you're thinking about the implementation of technology on Union Grove as you guys scale. What is that going to look like?
So we're using lots of monitoring technology.
Okay.
To try and understand what we're actually doing with the soil and what we're actually, how we're interfacing with it and what the end result is. So we're trying to measure the amount of carbon that we're putting into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to measure the biologic activity of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to measure how the grapes themselves are interacting with the ground.
Yeah.
Are they taking up the nutrients that they need? Are they short in nutrients? And so we're doing all of that monitoring using technology. And we're also, on the mechanical side, I invested in a company called Tortuga.
Okay.
That has a robot that harvests the grapes.
That's fascinating.
So it goes through the field and it looks and says, that grape's ready, that grape's not.
Yeah.
I'll take that grape.
Dang.
So it's cool. It's a great company.
Yeah.
When I invested, there were 20 companies that were trying to do it. Now we're down to one, and they're successfully doing it. So they're getting pick per hour rates in the 200 to 800 range, and quality is in the 90s. So
no way.
I'm really happy.
I can only imagine how many people that would take the place of from an operational standpoint.
Yeah. So the idea is that you bring Tortugas in and let them go.
Exactly. Now, can that technology be applied to other varieties, I would assume, or is it just for grapes?
Yeah. It's being used in Europe and Napa today for harvesting.
What does the timeline on Union Grove look like, and where are you at right now?
So we are 2 years into our 10-year journey. We will have our first super small harvest of grapes this year, and then on our standard pass starting next year. When you think about it, we got a lot of grapes that are going to be coming in over the next decade. And so I recently bought a freeze-dry trailer to allow us to take the trailer to the field and freeze-dry the grapes right on site.
Nice.
And I'm sorry that I didn't bring the grapes because
we're talking to Martin about making the trip out there. So at some point we're going to come out and
you got to try the grapes.
Yeah.
It's literally shocking how good they are.
I'm excited about that.
And that gives us a year-round market, which
for sure.
Yeah, we just have a short kind of an 8 to 10 week window.
Yeah.
With the traditional grapes, and so it's going to be a busy place.
It really is
over the next decade. And you think about revenues. We'll be a $30 to $40 million revenue company in kind of 7 years.
And then who knows where else you'll get the itch.
That probably will be my run.
You think so?
Yeah. That'll be my run.
So I want to get back to like regenerative as a movement and as a thing, because I think, I've seen a couple different regenerative operations, and I'm curious, like, the percentage of where the food system is right now that's even, adopted, I guess you could say organic practices might be like a step in the right direction, but not all the way towards regenerative. I mean, what do you think needs to happen on a macro level for this to actually be adopted at scale where it might have consumers?
People have to demand it. And the way that we drive adoption for people is that we convince them that the food quality that they're getting is so much better if it doesn't bear a regenerative label, that they will consistently ask for it. And guess what happens when people consistently ask for something? Stores figure out they have to carry it, right? And when stores figure out they have to carry it, they're willing to pay better prices to the producers, and the producers can grow than what needs to be grown to satisfy consumer demand. There'll always be a bifurcation in our system. There'll always be people who care about their health, and there'll be people who don't care about their health. But those who care about their health, I believe, over the next 3 to 5 years will begin to substantially demand that their food carries a regenerative label.
Yeah. And do you feel like regenerative can produce enough food at scale? Is there a concern around its production capability versus a traditional model?
I believe so. And I believe that the difference in quality of the food output will give the producers a much higher price than they would otherwise see. And it will give them an opportunity because, face it, regenerative without profit isn't regenerative.
No. Yeah.
You can't continuously do it. It's not regenerative.
It doesn't do what it needs. Yeah, it doesn't do what it is.
I think the challenge is going to be the consumers are going to have to pay a higher percentage of income for their food. And that'll be a decision that people have to make.
Yeah.
Whether they're willing to make the sacrifice in other areas to pay for a higher quality of life.
Right.
Health is wealth.
100%.
And if they make those right choices.
Yeah.
Then we'll have a really sustainable food system in the United States.
We would. Yeah.
We're one that's substantially improving the global environment at the same time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we hit on this at the beginning, but you've got a lot of different things going on. We put the list together, but what does it look like for you to balance your time between the different ventures you're in?
I spend 90% of my time on the venture capital business.
Yeah.
Because that's, it's critical for me to have high performing funds.
Mm-hmm.
And so the majority of my time is spent on venture capital.
Yeah.
What would be playtime for everybody else is farm time.
Nice.
And then I'm a volunteer fireman, and that's just when needed, as needed.
Mm-hmm. What is your farm time is your play time, I guess. But what's your role that you're playing on Union Grove right now? Do you get to get
Mostly
out?
to annoy everybody else.
Drive around, make some comments,
Drive
move
around
some
and say,
things.
why this or why that? And, what I'm trying to do is train a group of entrepreneurs.
Mm.
So everybody who works on the farm has a little bit of equity.
Yeah.
And so they all want the farm to be super successful so that when we have our event, whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
they'll be able to go and do it themselves on their own operation.
Mm.
And so I work really hard to try and help people achieve greatness.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that everybody who works on that farm is capable of achieving greatness in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a very typical farm. It's
No.
if you,
But you're not doing something very typical. You've got to be.
yeah, we're an outlier.
Yeah, you've got to flip the model to build something that goes against.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result, right?
You got to be a little crazy though.
So yeah, I think we fit that bill.
Yeah. So, kind of the thing that I want to end on here, actually back to the book and what you're doing. I mean, you talked about like the power of this community had, and what you're trying to do at Union Grove, sort of modeling some of, I guess, the behaviors you saw here. Where do you want that? Like, what do you want that impact to look like? What are some of your like just personal aspirations and goals for the impact that Union Grove can have beyond creating a great product?
So we have the CRA, Center for Regenerative Agriculture, where it's a non-for-profit that we're dedicated to try and help train other farmers in how to become regenerative. And more than train, I think our goal is to help people transition into regenerative agriculture and understand the benefits. And it's not only farmers, but it's chefs, it's consumers, it's healthcare professionals. Everybody has to become aware of the difference that regenerative farming can have. So Meredith Saby runs the Center for Regenerative Agriculture. She is incredibly talented in finding resources for nothing to turn into things that will help be really valuable for other people.
Nice.
So that's, if I leave a legacy, it's the legacy of helping to bring the rest of agriculture into where it needs to be today.
Yeah, that's beautiful. This was fun, Greg. Thanks for sharing so much about it. I hope people can take some of that away. And like, I hope that people through these conversations continue to learn more about regenerative agriculture, because I find it fascinating and find it inspiring. So
thanks for taking the time to help us talk about the narrative, which is incredibly valuable.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye, everybody. We'll see you later. Peace.